A lot of people reach a point in life where they realize they don't really have anyone to rely on. Not in a dramatic way, and not because something just went wrong. It's a slow realization that sets in after years of handling things on your own. You notice that if you stopped holding everything together, there isn't a clear person who would step in. You might have people around you, but no one who actually knows how heavy things feel or how much effort it takes just to keep functioning. This realization usually shows up quietly, often later in life, and once it does, it's hard to unsee. It changes how you look at your relationships, your routines, and the way you carry yourself through the day. This happens to a lot of people, not because they failed socially or didn't try hard enough, and not because they pushed everyone away. Most of the time it happens because life changed in gradual ways. Jobs shifted, relationships changed, parents aged or passed, children grew up and moved on, friendships thinned out, and somewhere along the way, the support that used to exist didn't keep pace with the person you became. From the outside, things can still look normal. You might still talk to family, you might still work, show up, and do what needs to be done. But emotionally, it feels like you're handling everything on your own. If something really went wrong, you're not sure who you would call, or you know who you could call, but you also know you wouldn't feel fully understood. For most people, this doesn't come from one big event. It builds from years of being the capable one, the steady one, the person who doesn't need much, the one who listens, helps, and keeps things moving. Over time, people get used to that version of you. They assume you're fine. They assume you'll speak up if you need something. They stop checking in, not because they don't care, but because the pattern taught them that you don't require it. Eventually, you realize that if you stopped holding everything together, there might not be anyone who naturally steps in. That realization can be uncomfortable to admit, and for some people it brings a sense of disappointment or anger. But it's more common than most people talk about. Feeling like you have no one doesn't automatically mean something is wrong with you. Sometimes it means you've outgrown the roles you were playing. The version of you that kept everything running doesn't fit the same way anymore, but the people around you are still responding to that older version. They're relating to who you used to be, not who you are now. That gap between your inner life and your outer relationships is often where loneliness shows up. Loneliness isn't really about how many people are in your life. It's about whether your inner experience has anywhere to go. It's about whether you feel like you can be honest about how tired you are, how uncertain things feel, or how much pressure you're carrying without being brushed off or misunderstood. When there's no place for that honesty, people usually stop trying to share it. They keep it to themselves and tell themselves it's not worth bringing up. Over time, that gets exhausting. For many people, this shows up most clearly in the evenings. The day is over, there's nothing urgent to distract you, and the house is quiet. You might sit down and realize there's no one you need to update, no one waiting to hear how your day went. You scroll for a few minutes, put the phone down, and feel that familiar sense of emptiness settle in. Not panic, not sadness exactly, just the awareness that you're on your own with your thoughts. In those moments, it's easy to numb out or start replaying old conversations and mistakes. Paying attention to yourself in that space, making something simple to eat, getting ready for bed instead of staying up late, doing one small thing that keeps tomorrow manageable, often makes the difference between feeling worn down and feeling steady the next morning. At some point, there's a quiet choice to make, even if it doesn't feel like a formal decision. You can keep waiting for someone else to notice how much you're carrying, or you can decide to take your own inner life seriously, even if no one else is doing that yet. That doesn't mean giving up on relationships, and it doesn't mean becoming self-focused. It means not treating your own needs as irrelevant just because they're not being acknowledged. In practical terms, this doesn't look dramatic. It looks ordinary. It looks like paying attention to your own fatigue instead of ignoring it, going to bed instead of staying up late and numbing yourself, eating regular meals instead of skipping them, making a simple plan for your day so it doesn't drift and feel pointless. These aren't self-improvement techniques. They're ways of reminding yourself that your life still deserves care, even when no one else is actively offering it. Another difficult part of this is that many people who feel they have no one spent most of their lives being useful to others. They helped, listened, showed up, and handled things. They didn't practice needing support, not because they didn't want it, but because they learned early that being low maintenance was safer. Over time, people came to expect that. They saw you as strong, independent, and capable. When you struggle later on, it doesn't always occur to them that help might be needed. That realization can bring up resentment, and that reaction makes sense. But staying in that place doesn't change much. What does help is slowly learning how to show up as a person instead of a role. That can mean saying simple things without explaining or apologizing, saying you're having a hard day, asking to talk for a few minutes, saying you don't need advice, just company. Sometimes people respond, sometimes they don't. Learning how to ask without collapsing, if the answer is no, is an important skill, especially later in life. There's also the question of meaning that tends to come up when people feel this alone. It's easy to wonder what the point is and who you're doing all of this for. One thing that often gets overlooked is that a life doesn't need an audience to be worth living well. Meaning doesn't always come from being seen or supported by others. Sometimes it comes from doing things that make sense to you, even if no one else notices. Learning something that holds your interest. Taking care of your body, keeping your space manageable. Building routines that don't drain you. These things aren't about achievement. They're about stability. Often, there's a stretch where you don't really belong where you were anymore, but you're not connected to what comes next. That in-between period can feel empty and uncomfortable. There's less structure, fewer roles, and not much reassurance. But it's also where people learn something important. They learn they can sit with themselves, tolerate the quiet, and keep their life moving without constant reinforcement. That doesn't mean connection stops mattering. It means your life doesn't have to pause while you wait for it. If you're listening to this and thinking that you really do feel like you have no one, that doesn't make you weak. It means you're being honest about where you are. The question isn't how to fix everything at once. A more useful question is what one small thing you can do this week that supports your own life without waiting for permission or validation. That's usually how things start to shift. Not quickly, not dramatically, but in a way that holds over time.